Welcome back to another episode of The Review, hosted by the Alaska Landmine. I'm your host, Cale Green, and today's episode is going to be a little different than usual. Today, I want to tell you a story from last weekend. Sun's out, boats on the water, Kachemak Bay. Hanging out with friends all weekend, away from town, away from the virus, away from this restaurant did that, and that person said this. And I like to film when I'm away. It's my job, but it's also my hobby. Having a good time, so I put my drone in the air. Want to get a shot of the beautiful landscape. And that's when I heard the gunshot. Welcome to The Review. So today, I'm going to be talking about a little incident that happened last weekend across the bay from Homer. For those unfamiliar with the waters south of Homer, it's a large, mostly sheltered area known as Kachemak Bay. Out of respect for the community and the people I know in it, I'm not going to be any more specific than that. But the details geographically matter less than what happened, and that's what I want to talk about today. I was out with my friends on the water. It was a beautiful, sunny weekend around much of the state, and we were taking advantage of the warm weather with kayaks, boats, and camping. While my friends were kayaking around a small bay that was mostly residences, I thought it was a good place to get some aerial shots. I kayaked over to our anchored boat and started setting up my drone. As an aside, I'm a licensed drone pilot with a federally registered aircraft. I've been working on drone regulation since I'd been in the Lieutenant Governor's office working for Meade Treadwell in 2013. I care about drone laws and been fascinated to see the policy change over the years. After setting up my drone, I took off and flew up to survey some flight paths. I was going to get two types of shot, one with my friends kayaking and one with the beautiful landscapes. And I did. And the flight went as planned, and that's always good when you're flying over mostly water. It's a little exhilarating and frightening at times, knowing that if something goes wrong, thousands of dollars can get eaten by the sea. While I was flying my drone back over the boat, one of my friends was getting out of their kayak and into the boat, still anchored in the bay. As I was landing, I heard a gunshot. Gunshots are a funny thing in rural Alaska because most of the time you don't know why they're happening. I grew up around guns. They've been a constant in my life. I grew up hunting, killed my first bear when I was 15. I'm comfortable around guns. I'm familiar enough to know a thing or two about the noises that they produce. And this sounded like it was close. It sounded like it probably wasn't a small caliber gun either. There are a lot of things that this gunshot could be. Maybe it was a defensive life and property incident that just occurred. Some resident having to kill a bear to defend their family. Maybe somebody was sighting in their new 30-06 in case they wanted to go shooting. Maybe somebody was shooting a gun because, well, they can. And that's cool too. But something led me to believe that that wasn't the case here. I looked over at my friend and asked him, maybe a little rhetorically, was that a warning shot? He said he doubted it. I said, I think that was a warning shot. I didn't think a whole lot about it after the fact because I was already done flying, so I continued to pack up my drone, enjoyed the rest of the weekend with friends, and made it back to town mostly without a hitch. I hadn't thought about the shot much more until I got contacted by a friend who'd grown up in the area. They had contacted me asking if I'd flown my drone in the area. Apparently, some of the residents were angry that this happened. This community was apparently not pro-drones. I was informed that they expressed this dislike by firing a warning shot. Warning shots also interesting because they really mean one thing or another. The first one is that I'm going to hurt you. The second one is I'm going to shoot something that isn't you. More often, the first. I told the person who informed me of this that what that person did was illegal and they shouldn't do it again. Shooting a warning shot at a federally registered aircraft is a big problem for whoever shot their shot. I told her that I would avoid flying my drone out there out of respect, but that the shooting thing was a big deal, and that I wouldn't press charges, but that they also couldn't do things like that in the future. Across the country, people who shoot at drones or shoot drones lose their case nearly every single time. And that's because the FAA holds sovereignty over the national airspace. They alone are in charge of everything that's above our properties. As a licensed drone pilot, I make sure to follow the law and have the legal right to fly my drone in that bay. And when somebody uses the threat of force to get somebody to stop doing something that's legal, that's called coercion. It's a legal term, and it's also a problem. Just like when I was landing my drone and heard a warning shot, I didn't think too much about the conversation after that. I put out a video I made of my weekend and in turn got attacked by a flurry of online comments made by members of the community. They had a lot of excuses as to why my video and conduct was wrong, but it all really boiled down to this. They didn't like the drone being flown around or over their homes. My favorite was an accusation that I broke the law, and this is I Hate Drones 101. In my experience, is also the number one thing that people do when they hear that somebody is talking about how they broke the law. Somehow, the twisted logic goes like this. Well, they said you broke the law when you fired a gun at their drone. Well, no I didn't, and I actually think they broke the law. Wait, what? Yeah, I just read the drone laws, and I think they broke this one. Drones are regulated under CFR 14 Part 107. Us pilots call it the 107 for short. For a drone flight to be legal, it follows certain rules put out by the FAA. One of the laws is you can't fly more than 400 feet above the ground. Another is that you have to maintain visual line of sight at all times with the drone for the flight to be legal. And yet another is that you cannot fly your drone over people. That last one is probably the biggest one that people try to cry wolf on. If you're not a drone pilot, you probably haven't spent a whole lot of time thinking about what the legal definition of the word over is. Over isn't some blanket ambiguous term that you say when something is above you. When somebody says there's a plane overhead, it's different than when something is directly above you. And the 107 deals with when it's directly above you as their definition of over. My drone had never been over anyone, although it flew over their homes. And people sometimes don't like that. But not liking something isn't me breaking the law. Not liking something doesn't give you a legal right or even a mildly ethical right to shoot a warning shot. And in all fairness, I'd been told after it was clear that me and some of the people I was with thought that warning shots were messed up, that the shot was a blank. But if I'm being perfectly honest, I don't know a single person in Alaska who owns a blank, let alone them hanging around their homes ready to scare people with a blank in their rifle. And unless this small community, a 30-minute boat ride away from Homer, was getting ready to put on a small, modern retelling of a very dark version of the West Side Story, I have doubts that any of them own blanks. And now, with backstory out of the way, I can get into the core of this video. The truth is, some people don't like drones. I get it. They can feel creepy. They're closer to us than planes, and most of them record pictures or video. I also don't like it when people take my picture at the park with a telephoto lens, but I would never fire a warning shot at someone who was doing that. Imagine what the headline would read if somebody fired a warning shot for a drone flying near their home in Anchorage. The truth is, drones aren't going anywhere. I'm sure that when the first helicopter started flying above people's homes, they didn't like it either. But we accept it as a sign of progress that isn't going to go away. That's really why I'm making this video too. See, it's not for me that I'm making a big deal of this, but for the 14-year-old kid that's from out of state that may fly legally one day there. If we don't take a stand now against that type of behavior, then that poor kid might one day be scared away from flying ever again because of somebody shooting a gun to serve as a warning. That behavior is inexcusable and not representative of the state that I grew up in. If people want to talk about toxicity in our culture, that type of incivility is what it looks like. It's an action that only really means one thing. Stop doing what you're doing, or I'll shoot a gun at you, and guns kill. I'm a federally licensed pilot with a federally licensed aircraft, and I was in the legal right. I'll avoid flying in that part of Kachemak Bay in the future, but other people won't. They have no reason to. One of my favorite things about Alaska is our legal right to access public places, public lands, public waters. There's no state that has better protection to access public places than Alaska. And in turn, we tolerate certain things. We tolerate easements next to our homes, tolerate trailheads that leave from our cul-de-sacs, tolerate people being on the beaches in front of our property. But the arguments that I'd heard out of this particular community were antithetical to that access. Somehow commenters from the community were asserting that there were no public beaches in that bay, when all beaches in Alaska are public. Asserting that people shouldn't come into their bay when the water is the ocean and it flows in and out every day for free. And then, when a drone flies around their home in the public national airspace, they fire a gun at the drone, allegedly a blank, to serve as a warning. I've flown my drone everywhere around the state, from communities that are remote and hard to get to fun flights right around Anchorage, and never before have I encountered such an overinflated sense of entitlement when it comes to our jointly owned public spaces. When I first started flying drones, I expected that hours and hours away from any city, and I've never encountered it. But somehow, I did a 30-minute boat ride away from Homer. If you don't like what a drone pilot is doing, tell them. People are generally good and want to be respectful. Had the people in that bay brought their boat out to talk to me or yelled at me from the shore, I would have landed my drone to talk to them. And likely, had they just said, "Hey, It feels kind of creepy. I'm sure you're legally in the right, but could you not? I wouldn't have kept flying, and we wouldn't be talking about this now. Drones are only going to increase from here. People across the country have tried unsuccessfully to legislate drones away time and time again. Their local laws have been beaten in court because it's up to the FAA to decide what happens in the national airspace. Even in Anchorage, former Assemblymember Patrick Flynn had tried to create a law forcing drones to be 50 feet above people's homes, and he got beaten back so badly that he withdrew his own bill. Drones are part of this great future we get to live through. They're helping surveyors see our world more accurately, farmers distribute seeds more efficiently for their crops, and they're even working on life-saving defibrillators that will one day be dispatched to reduce the amount of time that it takes to give a life-saving shock to somebody having a heart attack. Thanks again for joining on yet another episode of The Review. My name is Cale Green. It's been a pleasure talking with you guys today. I hope this has been a fun, kind of different conversation. If I bored you with too much drone stuff, tune in again next week. I won't be talking about drone stuff, but this was a really fun way to discuss public lands. It was a good way to talk a little bit about public spaces and kind of what I think Alaska's moving toward in the future. And it's not shooting guns at people. Thanks again. See you next week.